Hi friends, another week and Data Platform Central is happy to welcome you back to another useful quick tip, the second video in the series AI in PowerApps. In the previous week, we had seen the first video where we used a pre-built AI model so as to extract data from user input and create sentimental analysis based out of it. So in this second part of the same series, we are going to see a customized AI model, and we'll be creating this model for extracting some key elements from a user input text. So for the example that we have taken, we have some invoice related details which are captured by the invoice department, and they have the remarks where they identify who paid it and when it was paid, and there are similar details from it. And we'll be making use of the text extraction model so as to extract key elements from this text and save it as data elements within our database. So let's see how this can be done. For this demo, we'll be making use of a Dataverse table which will be used for storing this data, and we will be capturing the data from the users, and based on the remarks that the users key in, which are nothing but the employees of your invoice processing team, we will be extracting out the key elements from the remarks and saving the corresponding data elements into different fields that you have set up inside our database field. So without wasting any more time, let's quickly go to the demo and see how we can implement this AI model, train it, and later use it within our PowerApps. For the sake of this demo, we'll be using a sample data as shown in the Excel sheet. So this consists of invoice number, invoice date, and some remarks as entered by the employees of your invoice processing team. So if you see the remarks consist of details like when the invoice was paid or what is the status of the invoice. For example, if you see the first remark, it says invoice paid by Mary on particular date, which means that what is the current status of invoice which is paid, who paid the invoice, it was paid by Mary, and when was it invoiced. The dates, every detail is included within the remarks itself. If you see the second one, it says invoice delayed, so again that's another status of invoice. So like that, if you see any of them like Millie paid amount, or maybe invoice was paid in full by Smitha, so take any of these remarks, it consists of multiple key elements like the invoice status, the invoice was paid by which employee, and invoice paid date. So we will be applying a customized AI model so as to extract these key elements from the free text which is entered by the employees, and it is not in any particular format. If you see, there are whole different types of formats. Some of them are like starting with invoice paid, some of them like the Millie paid. So there are different types of formats under the same field. So now the challenge for us is to train a model which is capable of extracting out these important key elements from within this free text. So let's see how we can create the AI model first, and then later we'll be using this AI model after training it inside one of our PowerApps. So the first step for us is to create a table inside our Dataverse to which we can pull this data, and from this data then we will start creating the AI model by feeding some of this data as a test data, and we will train the model based on that. And once the model is trained and it's published, then we can use a PowerApps which will be again feeding on the same data, and we will be applying the trained model on top of it so that it is automatically able to pick out these key elements from the free text field and put it into the different fields as we want it inside our database. So let's quickly go and create the required table inside Dataverse and put this data into the Dataverse. So let's go to powerapps.microsoft.com and let's go to the table. So we have a table which we have set up for this purpose, and the table would be called invoice track because it contains the details of invoices. So let's go inside invoice track table, and you can see all the columns which is available by default. In addition, we have added some details like invoice date, invoice number, then we have the remarks which is the important column. So there are three details which will come from the Excel sheet. One would be the invoice date, another one would be the invoice number, and the third would be the remarks. And from these three data, then we will be applying the AI model on top of remarks, which is a free text field which will be entered by the employee who is processing the invoice. And when it gets applied, it will extract the key elements from this remark and it will save it to paid by paid date and invoice status. These are the three columns which will be getting values from these remarks fields automatically by means of our trained AI model. So let's first populate this table with some data. We'll be making use of the data flows using the same set of steps which we showed in the video 1. So I'm not again repeating here. So let's fill this with some data. So as you see, the data has now loaded inside the table. So we followed the same set of steps to create a data flow and we published it right away so as to populate the data from the Excel to the table that we have set up. Now it has around 30-35 rows which we have populated inside. Now let's go and create the AI model, which is our first step. So we are going to create an AI model and then we are going to train it. So let's go to the AI builder. So this is the component inside Power Platform where you can create AI models, and this needs a separate license as on today if you want to use it. So if you want to use AI builder, you need to have a separate AI builder license. And you can take a trial which is available for around 60 days to start off, and once the trial is finished, you need to pay for the license. So let's go to the AI builder and you have the build and the models. So we are going to build a model. So let's go to the build option and we are going to create a new model. So here we have category classification, entity extraction and form processing. We are going to do entity extraction here. We are going to extract some entities from the free text data which the user is inputting. So let's select entity extraction and you need to name this model something. Let's name it extract invoice details. Extract invoice details. And let's click on create. So if you see, what it needs is basically 10 example sentences. So it needs to have at least 10 inputs for it to extract the required entity. So it will automatically formulate the rules based on the sentences that you are inputting to it, based on the 10 sample sentences. So let's click on create. So once it loads, the wizard will be automatically launched and it will ask you for the table from which we need to train your model. So we have the table already ready. So let's select the invoice track table. So here is our invoice track table, and the column that we are going to provide is the remarks column, which is a free text field. And let's click on next. It's very easy. It's a no code solution. We are not going to write any code here. We are just going to configure the wizard, and the language is obviously English. If you want to change it, you can change it. In this case, we are having English only. So let's now click on analyze and it will start automatically analyzing the data, and then based on the data it will provide us with some sentences out of which we can choose our training sentences. So it's not necessary that it should be the first 10 sentences. We can choose the sentences as we want. So after the analysis, which is going to take a while, it will provide you with the details of all the data which is available inside your table, and it will automatically try to analyze the data within your table based on the pre-built entities. There are a set of entities which are available by default. These are called the pre-built entities. You can see it on your side. Date, time, organization, person name, age. These are some of the entities which is available by default. It will try to find out based on the data like what it represents. So here automatically, if you see, it automatically finds out the date, time in most cases, and some cases it is able to find out the person name as well. So these are two pre-built entities that it is able to find out. So what we need to do is that we need to actually create what all entities we want. We need paid by, then we need paid date, and then we need the invoice status. So paid by is automatically person name, so that's fine. We are still able to find out person name, and paid date would be the date time, which is also automatically it is picking up. The only thing that we need to add to it is the invoice status. So what you need to do is like we need to define a new entity which is called invoice status. So that's the new entity that we created, and now we need to give it some examples like how it will come. So for that you need to put in some sample sentences. This is an example of a case where we have invoice status. So it will identify that when you put it in under curly braces, it will understand this is an example of a invoice status. So it will automatically mark it. Similarly, you can take the sample statements itself and you can copy paste it, or if you want to write new ones, you can do that. So you can say like Mary paid the invoice. These are just sample statements, so you can type in anything you want. So you need to give at least 5 statements, and then another type. So try to give it different types of statements so that it is able to read from within your different types of data. So we had one which starts with invoice delayed, then the second one was Mary paid, then the third one was like, so let's add a different types like need to follow up with John. So that's another type where it needs to follow up. So follow up is your invoice status, and the fifth type is Rob paid the invoice info. So you can just make this paid as the status here. So like that you can define your rules, and then you can add one more. So card declined, invoice pending. So then pending is your status. So you have added different types of rules using which you can determine the status from within that. So now you can click on create. It will automatically create the invoice status entity based on these rules, and now it will you can also identify the other entities from within your sample sentences. So what you can do is, like in the first sentence you can see that this is the invoice status. So you can select that and select invoice status, and then you can select the name and choose person name. Now the next type of statement, always try to choose different types of statements. So this is the invoice status here, and Kathy will be the person name. Now if you want to select more statements also, that is also possible. So like follow up Taimur. So in this case Taimur is the person name, delayed is the status. So you can select each one of them. So delayed is select, make it invoice status, Taimur select and make it the person name, and you can continue it with the rest of the file as well, because in some cases the new pattern of statements might come later in the file. So you can try to identify as much patterns as you want, so that the AI model is trained to the best possible set of combinations, and it will be able to use those combinations to extract out the text when you actually run your data against this trained model. As much as possible, try to get the maximum coverage. So whenever you want to select it, just if it's not available, just select another one and then select it. It's a small glitch with the wizard as of now. So you can click on next. So based on these statements that you have selected, it will automatically try to train the model. So you have now come to the wizard where you are going to train your model. So click on train. It will start training the model, and it will take a while before it completes the training. But what you can do is, like, you can click on go to models. You don't have to wait for that. So after a while, once the model gets trained, you can go inside the model and you can publish it. As you see, the status has now become trained. So you can now click on the model and you can publish it. Before you use a model, you have to first publish it. Then only the model will be available for use inside your PowerApps as well as for Power Automate. So you can click on publish. You see it, once it's published, it will be available for your PowerApps as well as for your Power Automate. So click on publish and wait for it to be published. The publishing is done. Now you can, if you want, you can click on the use model. It will lead you to some documentations of how to use this model inside Power Automate and PowerApp. So as of now, we are not going to do that. We are going to test this model. So we have published it, and you can see the text box here. You can enter your sample text here. You can click on this button to test it, and automatically it will analyze and try to take out the entities from that. So what we can do is, like, go back to your Excel sheet where you have the data. Just copy one of the random sentence from there which contains the remarks, and then you can come and paste it inside your test your model, and you can see if the model is able to find out the entities from that. Click on analyze text, and it will analyze and tell you the entities. It will try to extract the entities. See, automatically it extracted the invoice status, it extracted the person name, and it also extracted the date time. If you see, there is a small thing, it is actually taking by 12 also as a part of date time. So there can be small glitches like this, but once you use it inside, you can keep on refining it. So it's going to be an iterative process. It's not like one time you train it and you leave it as it is. As and when your input starts changing, you also have to keep on training your model so as to increase its effectiveness. You will require this GUID, so you can copy this GUID which is generated by the model that you created, and you can paste it inside a notepad, because this is required while you invoke the model from within your PowerApps. So I've saved it in a notepad. Now let's go and create the application. Now, because we already have the data, we'll start from the data. Click on Dataverse. This is exactly how we created the application in the last video as well. So you can select your Dataverse entity, and inside that you can see the table. Go to the invoice track, or you can even search for that invoice. You will automatically get the table invoice tracks, and click on connect, and it is automatically going to create a canvas app for you based on the data that it finds inside your page. Now you are going to add these additional bits of data to it by applying this AI model. So wait for the app to be loaded. So the app is now loaded for you with the default fields. As we did in the last case, we also have to now redefine these fields. So first go to the edit screen, go to the form inside the edit screen, and click on edit fields, and you know that it only adds the default 2 fields which you don't want. So remove both the fields and add the required fields in. So remove both, and we are going to add the invoice number, invoice date, then remarks. These are the 3 things which comes from the file and which is already present in your table. And in addition, you are going to add paid by, paid date, and the current invoice status, and we are going to add. So everything will be added to your edit form. And now you can go to the details screen. Here also you need to change the existing fields. So click on edit fields, change the existing fields, remove the fields which are included. These are the standard fields. Instead of that, you are going to add the customized fields that you added. So both of them are added. Now come to the last part, which is your browse gallery. Come to browse gallery, and here also you are going to change it. So click on edit, and the title will be, instead of name, it should be invoice number. So select invoice number, body would be remarks, and let the subtitle be invoice date, and then we can add the rest of the things later. So now if you run this, you will be able to see the data. So you can see all the other data is proper data. Now we are going to apply the new columns. So as of now, we have only the 3 columns that we have got from the file. Now we are going to add the additional bits using the AI build. Before that, the first thing is for us to add the AI model inside our applications. For that purpose, you can go to the data, which is where you add the new connections, and you click on add data. You can see under that AI models, you can scroll down and see the entity extraction. So you see the entity extraction here, so you can select the entity extraction from here. Now the entity extraction model is added to your application. Now you can go and add the new columns, and you can use the AI model so as to extract the required data from your remarks table. For that, you can go back to the tree view and go to the edit screen and go to the edit form, and you are going to add the bits for that. So for that purpose, you need to select the corresponding data cards. So what we are going to do, we are going to first add the paid by. So for the paid by, you can go to the advanced properties, and you need to first unlock the property, and you need to set expression for the default and the update property. So for default, we can put an expression like first of filter of AI builder dot extract. So AI builder is the model that we added. Inside that, we have something known as extract text entities, which is the function that we are going to perform here, and it accepts 2 arguments. First would be the text, and then the second one would be the model ID. So here the first one will come from the remarks. So you need to go to the remarks and see which text box, the input text box, corresponds to remarks. So that corresponds to data card value of 6. So that's why you are passing as the first argument data card value 6 dot text, which will take the text which is entered by the user under the remarks text box. And then the second one, you will pass the model ID. So the way you need to pass it is, you need to pass it as a JSON. So if you see the second argument, it expects an argument where it consists of 2 parts, model ID and language. Language is an optional part. So model ID, you will pass the GUID, and that GUID is exactly what you have copied in a notepad. When you created the AI model and published it, it automatically generated the GUID, which you have already copied inside your notepad. So this GUID will be passed inside the model ID. So when you pass the GUID, you need to pass it as a text, and you need to pass it inside a function called GUID, which will convert this text into an actual unique identifier value, and to pass it against the model ID. And the return type will consist of a JSON, inside which you have to look for the entities JSON, and that entities JSON will consist of all the different types of data which it identifies. The first one will be the person name, another one will be date time, and another one will be the invoice status, city, and whatever entities that you have identified inside your AI model will be returned along with the result. Out of that, you need to get the value corresponding to person name inside paid by. So that's why you are applying a filter on top of it. When you apply a filter on top of this result set, the result set will be a table, a JSON based table. So that tabular result, it will apply a filter to get the node corresponding to person name, and from that node you will take the value, which will give you the value of the paid by. And similarly for the paid date, you can copy it, and you can go to the paid date, and again you can unlock the paid date, and for the default you can copy this. The only difference will be, instead of taking it from the person time, it should be from the date time, and it will take the value. One more thing you need to ensure is that, because when you take values from the JSON, it will be a text by default. You need to convert it into date. So for that purpose, you need to pass a date value function. There is a function called date value, which converts a text to a corresponding date value. So you need to pass the date value over this, so as to make it into a date. Otherwise, this will throw an error, because your data type is date and not a text. And now for the invoice status, you need to again copy the same thing, unlock it, paste it here, and here instead of person name it should be invoice status, and again you don't have to do any conversion here because it is still a text, and you need to be careful about the case sensitivity of this because this is inside the JSON, it is case sensitive. Now as you see, once you start correctly putting in your expressions, you can already see that it is automatically generating the value from the invoice. See, this remark was invoice paid by Robin, automatically it picked up the Robin as the paid by, and it picked up 12 November as a paid date, and for the invoice status it picked up as paid, which means that your expressions are correct. You can already see a preview of that in the application. Now if you try to run the application, you will be able to see that. So now go to the browse screen, click on the play icon, and you can see that the different invoices are there. Now you can go inside one of the invoice, and you can see that currently there is no paid by, paid date and invoice status. This is because you have not yet edited. So now when you click on edit, and now just when you save it, you can see that it's already taken it. Now wherever it is not there, if you want, you can put it manually also. So some cases it might not pick it up because it's not refined yet. As you refine it, it will keep on picking it up. So now you can, whichever it is left out, if you want, you can type it by yourself. So the other two details it has already picked up, so you can save it, and it's saved now. Now similarly, if you want to go to a different type of value, so here say this one, and you can go to edit and see it is already taking paid by, date and invoice status. Some cases it takes all, it depends on how the AI model has trained itself. So if you see, it was able to take every one of these details. So now if you go to one of them, say, so let's take one other example. So see here you have something known as Thompson paid invoice in full. So if you go inside that, you edit it, you can see that the paid by is not automatically taken, but the invoice and the status is, the date and the status is already taken. Now let's see why this happens. So this is a special case. And so we copy it, we go to the AI model and we'll try test it. Let's paste the copy text that we copied from the application, and we are going to see why it is not working. See, what happens is that it is identifying Thompson as a city. Thompson, though it's a name, it also corresponds to a city in one of the states. So this is one problem that can occur. But if you see our requirement, we don't require identifying a city. So why did it identify Thompson as a city? This is because when you go inside the model, you can see that when you refined the model, when you created the model, it didn't specify what all entities it needs to be identifying. You selected all the default entities which was part of the extraction, text extraction AI model. So now what we need to do is, like, we need to restrict it to only identify those entities which we require. That is only the three entities which are invoice status, person name and the date type. So let's click on next. So this is where you need to change it. So if you see the entities, it is now trying to identify every one of these entities. It's identifying city, color and all, which you don't require. So what you need to do is, like, click on the settings, and you see every one of the pre-built entities are now checked. You need to clear all, and you need to only select the ones you want, person name and date and time. So these are the two entities that you need to identify in addition to the invoice status. So now you see it has only these three entities. So invoice status, date time and person. Now click on train and train it once again. Now it will not identify any other entities like cities. Wait for it to be trained and then publish. So the training is now done. Now we can publish. The publishing is done. Now we can test your string once again, and now see, you can see that the Thompson is now identified as a person name. Now go back to your apps, click on the app in edit mode. Now go to the connections, and for the entity extraction you can remove it and re-add it, and once it is re-added, now you can run it and you can search for that invoice and try to edit it. Now it picks up the name correctly because you have refined the AI model, and now it knows that Thompson corresponds to a name, and you can save on it so that the name Thompson will get also saved. Like that, whatever you need to refine, you can always go back and keep on refining the AI model, come back and rerun the app, and it will make sure that the details are getting correctly captured the next time. So as you go on, as new types of remarks, new formats of remarks keep on continuing, make sure that you are continuously training the model, and over a period of time the model will be capable of extracting the details from 80 to 90% of your text. Still there will be some part which requires human intervention because it keeps on changing especially, but as far as the format conforms to one of the standard formats, then the AI model will be able to pick up the extracted details from it and put it into the corresponding fields for saving inside your database. So as seen from the skip demo, you can make use of a customized AI model inside your Power Platform to perform such AI related activities inside your Power Apps or the Power Automate. For creating the customized AI model, you will be making use of the AI builder, and later you will be using the AI model inside your Power Apps or the Power Automate for performing the required options like extraction of key elements in this case. And as shown in the demo, you are able to refine the AI model by providing different varieties of data so as to train the model, and correspondingly the effectiveness of model will keep on increasing. Hope this demo was useful. As usual, keep sending your feedback and let me know your comments. Feel free to follow my channel and click on bell icon for getting notifications. Meet you all soon with another useful quick tip like this. Till then, bye and thanks for it.